So we're working on the Watermaker today down at the boat. I just thought I'd go through the challenges that we have faced, a couple issues that I've heard of other people having, but I haven't actually seen videos of how they've addressed it. So hopefully this is useful. What is a Watermaker? It's a desalinator, takes the salt out of the water. How does it work? It's very simple. There's a membrane. It's called a reverse osmosis membrane. You have a pump that brings the pressure up to about 800 psi. The fresh water goes through the reverse osmosis membrane and comes out as fresh, and the salt water carries on and goes out as salty. So what is basically industry standard is that you put filters in front of your pump, and they filter the particles out before they get into the pump, and then the pump pumps the clean salt water through the membrane, and so your membrane stays relatively clean, your pump stays relatively clean. There are two basic types of high pressure pumps. The simpler type is a piston pump, and then the slightly fancier type is called an energy recovery pump, known as a Clark pump. So Spectra and Schenker are the two kind of big ones. There's a few smaller ones. They basically recycle the pressure out of the brine. I'm not going to get into it, but they use 1/3 the amount of power to produce the same volume of water. Seems like a no-brainer. Obviously, they're a bit more expensive. But on a boat where power is limited and you're relying on solar and batteries and whatnot, seems like a good thing. Anyway, as I was doing my research, I discovered that the main marine chandlery in our hometown in Victoria, BC, is a Spectra dealer. So they have the units right there. There's no shipping. I can just go pick it up, put it in the back of my car. So that made the choice easy. The Spectra unit that I got has some automation, and it has a little touch screen, and it had a little float switch that you put into the tank. So basically you push the button, it runs automatically until your tank is full, and then it shuts off. It does a flush, and it's fully automatic. And I thought that would be a good risk mitigation in case the Watermaker were ever to fail. You would know that it had failed, and you would still have water in your tanks. If you're running it every day, and one day it doesn't work, and it may not be the Watermaker's fault, it may be that your solar system isn't working, or your batteries, or whatever, you can't run it, at least then you know you can ration your drinking water, stop cleaning, stop bathing, stop everything, just ration your drinking water. And even if you only have half tanks, 60 gallons should be plenty to get to wherever you're going, if you're assuming you're going to arrive back at land in a week or two. Another consideration is there's a whole school of thought of people who don't want to run their Watermaker in dirty water. They would rather have larger water tanks and a Watermaker that can fill those tanks very quickly, and they would rather go leave the harbor, go out into clean water, run it for an hour or two, fill their tanks, come back, and do that maybe once a week. Okay, so first of all, as I already said, running your Watermaker every day, keeping your tanks full all the time, to me, it makes better sense in terms of if something were to go wrong. Also, I've read that membranes don't like sitting. The Watermaker membranes like being used every day or two. And then the other piece is, with these filters, you are filtering out all the dirt in the water. And so if you're running in a slightly dirtier harbor, you should just be clogging up these filters faster, so that's a trade-off. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to clean or replace my filters more frequently if the water's dirty, but, that's just a trade-off that I would be willing to make. We bought the Watermaker. I installed it, tried it, it worked. Although I did notice right away that this is not whisper quiet. It is not crazy loud. I understand that the piston pump Watermakers can be crazy loud. Yes, compared to that, they're sort of whisper quiet, but I've never had any other Watermaker. This is the only one I've ever had, and compared to me whispering, it is not whisper quiet. So I installed it. This convenient spot for it is under our bed. On our trip, it was in the V-berth. And I realized as soon as I tried it the first time, like, well, we can't run this at night. We're not going to be able to sleep on top of this noise. You know, if we're in the cockpit, that's the furthest away from the V-berth, we can barely hear it. If the engine's on, we definitely cannot hear it. So that was the first thing we noticed. Then we left on our trip. But what I discovered is the filters plugged up very quickly. And I would take them apart and they'd be all filled with sludge. You know, they're not super cheap. They're like $20 each, and you got two of them, a 20 and a 5. They take up space. And so, you know, we left with, I think, 6 of each, thinking that they should last 3 to 6 months. We were told like maybe 1 or 2 filter changes per month. I'm going to be doing 1 or 2 filter changes per week, or almost 1 filter change per day at the rate things are going. So I got on the internet and I got on the phone with the dealer and the Spectra manufacturer and talked to all different people. And what I learned was in these northern colder waters, we have more plankton, and they plug up the filters. They're bigger than 20 microns. They're bigger than 5 microns. There was some talk that a 100 micron washable stainless steel mesh filter, that people had success with that. But by this point, we were down the Oregon coast, partway. Now, I called the guy in San Francisco and I said, hey, like, you're the next Spectra dealer that we're going to encounter on our trip. At minimum, I'm going to need to buy a bunch of new filters from you, but I'd like to resolve this issue. And I wish somebody had told us that people run Watermakers here in Canada, and they must have all figured out that they clog up with plankton. Maybe they clog up more at certain times of the year. I don't know. Anyway, the guy in San Francisco assured us, and Spectra headquarters, which is also I think it's in Sacramento, they all assured us that as soon as we get south, basically south of San Francisco, there will be no more plankton and the filters will not be plugging up as frequently. Almost didn't fully believe them at first. I was like, they're just trying to get me off the phone. But they turned out to be correct. The waters were clear. We could start seeing our anchor laying on the bottom in the sand. Up here in Canada, I can't even see the bottom of my keel, even on a very bright sunny day. The water's just simply too cloudy. So that was fine. But I did kind of file in the back of my head, okay, when we get home to Canada after this trip, I'm going to need to figure something out, because we want to keep the boat. We want to keep using the boat in Canada, and we don't want to have our filters clogging up every couple hours. So then a couple months passed, and we got down to Mexico. And basically, I would just hit start every day. The Watermaker would fill the tank and then shut off. The filters stopped clogging up, like I said. But what I also noticed, so our automated system, it has a pressure sensor that measures the pressure drop across the filters that basically determines when they are clogged, and it tells you on the touchscreen when the filters are clogged. We stopped getting those warnings about clogged filters, and I would run the Watermaker for 2 or 3 weeks every day. I'm like, this is kind of odd that I'm not getting a warning. So I would take the filters out and they would look relatively clean. And I'd say, well, I guess I'll put in new filters because it seems weird. I should be changing the filters like twice a month, every 2 or 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever. Okay. So I would change them even though it didn't tell me they were dirty. They'd be a bit discolored, but they weren't like caked up with mud or anything. Then one day, I went to start it up again, and it would not achieve the required pressure to start. Determined that there was this one part in the Clark pump. There was this plastic part, fancy type of plastic, a very durable type of plastic, which had worn out. I called Spectra. I said, this machine is less than a year old. This part has failed. They said, well, parts wear out and you must have got some contaminated water. And anyway, they would not give me a part under warranty. So I was forced to buy a part from a Mexican Spectra dealer, plus shipping from a different part of Mexico. Kind of a bummer. And I had to take this whole thing out, take it all apart, which I had never done because it was a new unit. So I had to learn how it all comes apart. Put it back together. It worked for about a month, and then it stopped working again. This time we were in a different part of Mexico where there was an authorized Spectra dealer in the town. They laid out all the parts. They showed me that it was incredibly worn out. So they were correct. I mean, I could see it with my own eyes, all these plastic parts worn out. So that led me down this path to determining that the filters in their housings, this is not the Spectra one, but like this but smaller, were not fully sealing, and dirt was getting past the filters. And that would explain why they never seemed to get dirty. What I determined was the filters were like a millimeter or two short compared with the housing. Maybe the housing was made a little bit on the larger end of the tolerance. Maybe the filters were made a little bit on the end of the smaller end of the tolerance. And there was a tiny gap and dirt was getting past. That was the conclusion I came to. I made a video about that. I'll link the video in the description. Yeah, they rebuilt the Watermaker. They rebuilt it. They put in new parts. We crossed to Hawaii. It worked. All the way there, all the way back to Canada, it worked. I could tell there was still some issues. The pressures were high. The output was low. When we got home to Canada, I took the whole thing out of the boat, boxed it all up, and mailed it at my cost to Spectra headquarters in California. They rebuilt it. They did not charge me for the rebuild, and they did not charge me for the return shipping. So kudos to them for kind of a warranty repair. But this was only after I had paid for all of the initial repairs. Anyway, they assured me I got the system back. They said this is basically brand new. We've put all new parts inside. It's back to spec. It's as good as a new unit. We've tested it. I also sent my filters and housings, which I had determined were not fully sealing. They said, no, we've inspected them and they seem to be sealing and everything's fine. It must have been something you did. You must have not put the filter in right or something. Okay, well, I don't know what to say. So that's where we got to back in Canada. And I knew, even if the filters are working, I knew that I needed a way to deal with the plankton from our local cold waters. And so I researched and came up with a sand filter, or otherwise known as a media filter. Basically what it is, a tank with sand in it. The water gets pumped through the sand, and the sand filters out plankton or whatever. And then most of these media tanks, sand tanks, have a way of back flushing them. So you actually push water the opposite direction and overboard, and it takes all the plankton out. And so I like the idea of that. You're not replacing filters, you're just cleaning the sand. Couldn't find a good source for a marine rated sand filter. A lot of them seem to be really big for like really big power boats. They would put this 4-foot tall tank in the side of your engine room. What I found though on Amazon were sand filters about this big, this round, maybe they're, 5-8 gallons, for pool filtration. So it's a plastic tank. It's got a big plastic valve on the top. It's all plastic. There's nothing to corrode. Should be okay in a marine environment. The one issue is you might worry if the tank were to crack, but as long as it's above the water line, you basically get a lot of wet sand, 5 or 6 gallons of water plus sand, but it wouldn't sink your boat. I also installed a little pump down by the sea strainer, so it pumps water up through the sand filter before it gets into the Spectra Watermaker. And that also gives me the ability to run that pump manually and put the thing into backflush mode, and it it'll flush it overboard. So we tried that. The name is something like Zeolite. The manufacturer, it was branded here under Watts brand, which is a kind of a plumbing brand in Canada. It's advertised to filter down to supposedly as low as 5 microns. It's a special sand. Anyway, I was able to order it, get it, $60, bag of sand. I only used half a bag. So I thought, well, if it filters to 5 microns, before it even gets to these filters should stay crystal clean. It definitely saves the normal filters a lot. Oh, and I'll mention one thing I did with these, thinking they're too short. I just added a rubber ring onto them. So it effectively makes them 2 or 3 millimeters longer. So it gets a tighter fit. There should be no way for particles to get around, to get passed through the filters. So with the combination of all this, I'm confident that I'm protecting my Clark pump. One other issue. So the way that these Spectra and Schenker units work is they use a SureFlow pump, which is basically the same as the water pump that runs your boat, makes water come out the sink. It's at a higher pressure. It's about 180 psi. Your water pump on your sink is only about 40 psi, usually. So higher pressure, which means it's a bit louder, and it's also running continuously. Whereas the one on your sink, it only runs when you turn the tap on, then it shuts off. So that is the level of noise that we have to listen to. The other thing that I didn't fully realize is these pumps, service life is about 500 hours of runtime. But I didn't fully appreciate, wait a minute, if I'm running this 5 hours a day, it's going to hit its 500-hour service life in 100 days. There's 365 days in a year. So that means I'm going to be replacing this pump 3 times every year. So if we go for our 1-year trip, I should have taken 3 spare pumps. Our pumps did fail twice on the trip, and I got a new head once, and then I got a whole new pump the second time. And I was kind of bummed out. But then when I realized, I was like, oh no, this actually does make total sense that the pump is worn out. It's supposed to be worn out. So that combined with the noise of the pump is irritating. Now, the bigger Spectra units that make 400 gallons a day, 700 gallons a day, 1,000 gallons a day, they use a different arrangement. Yeah, a bigger, heavier duty motor coupled with what's called a vane pump. The brand is Procon. And they both, the motor and the pump, have a service life of thousands of hours. And they're quieter, or they can be quieter. I would like to switch to that. We were at a marina in Mexico, and I met a guy, and he had gotten a Procon feed pump with a bigger motor. And he had rigged it up, and it was dead silent. But what he had is he had the Procon pump on a 3-phase AC motor, which are known for being extremely smooth and quiet. To create the 3-phase, he had a VFD, a variable frequency driver, creating high voltage 3-phase. That had to have an input of high voltage. I think his was 240 volts, high voltage, for which he had an inverter, quite a few components in the system, and probably some losses, electrical losses going up with the inverter, going to 3-phase. But I kept thinking like, okay, I can probably do better than this. This would be the ultimate. If I just had a brushless DC motor that would natively run off 12 volts with a speed controller, it would be very, very quiet, and I could dial it in to whatever speed makes the right pressure. I could just monitor the pressure, dial in the speed, and it would take the place of my SureFlow pump. One downside is the Procon pumps are more susceptible to wear and tear from grit. So now I'm back to, okay, we need to protect this pump even more from grit. Now on the Spectra unit, the seawater comes in through the sea strainer, goes into the SureFlow pump. That pushes it through the 20 and the 5 micron filter, and then it goes into the Clark pump, which is the high pressure pump. So the filters are only protecting the high pressure pump. Switching to a Procon, I now need to move the filters, and I need to protect the Procon pump as well. So rather than making a million different changes all at the same time, what I've decided to do is add a larger 5-micron filter before the Procon pump. So now we're going through hull, C strainer, a little low pressure pump, into the sand filter, which can be back flushed if you want, then into this, which is 5 micron. It's gigantic. And because this is going to be under low pressure, I was able to get the clear housing. The clear housings cannot handle high pressure, but it can handle lower pressure, which means I'll be able to see what it looks like, how dirty it is. From there, it's going to go into the Procon pump. From there, because it's already set up this way, it's going to go into the Spectra 20 micron and 5 micron, and from there into the Clog pump. I may move things around later, but this is what I'm going to do for now. I have a brushless DC motor. I got it off Alibaba. I was unable to find any branded one anywhere, but I was able to work with a vendor on Alibaba to produce this. They didn't even have a listing for it. They had listings for other slightly different ones, but I said I want it to be 500 watts, so half a horsepower, with a speed controller, 12 volts. So pretty thick wires going in. It's about double the horsepower that I would need to run the system as it is. The Spectra that I got that does 200 gallons per day, it has a 20-inch membrane. So I predict that I will be running this at about half speed through the 20-inch membrane, which means that if I were to get a 40-inch membrane, I could crank it up and run it at full speed, and it should produce twice the volume of water per hour. So right now it's rated to produce 30 liters per hour. If I get the 40-inch membrane, turn the Procon pump faster, should be able to produce 60 liters of fresh water per hour, which means even if this thing isn't as quiet as I'm hoping it will be, I will only have to listen to it for half the amount of time. Okay, so the vane pump arrived in the mail today. So I'm down at the boat. We're going to get it, maybe get it installed, maybe try it out. So I've taken the old pump out. So here's the old pump. This is, I believe it's called a diaphragm style pump. Here's the new Procon vane pump. So quite a bit heftier. This is all beautifully machined stainless steel. And so this apparently can do about 190 gallons per hour, which is about 600 liters per hour, at like 120 psi roughly, which is exactly double what I need, which means I will be able to, in the future, hopefully upgrade my Watermaker membrane to one that's twice as big. So yeah, down here on the bottom, it's there's the model number. This is a Procon brand. So it has a bypass set at 130. So if something were to jam or plug up, it will bypass at 130 psi. This has a flange here that does not require screws or nuts or bolts or anything, and then it has a slot drive here. So here is the flange that bolts it on, and here is you need this little brass or bronze, I guess, coupling that goes in here, and then this connects to a motor. So that's that piece. Here is the motor that goes. It is 12 volts. It is a brushless DC motor. Should be very, very smooth, and it has the correct flange. So I believe this is called like a 48, also known as a carbonator pump. So it has the slot in here that fits that guy, and then the flange that works with this. So this will go on here. I can't do it with one hand while I'm holding the camera, but you get the idea. This is, well, the sticker says 550 watts. Here is the controller that it came with. So the motor plugs in here like this. Can't really do it with one hand. And then you've got your 12-volt wires here that I can run. And then it has a speed adjuster here, which will vary it from basically 0 RPM all the way up to what it's rated at, which is 1500. So, and I think these pumps are rated at about 1500, maybe 1400. Anyway, so this is twice what I need. So I should be able to dial this down to half speed and get what I need for now. And in the future, if I get a larger membrane on my Watermaker, I'll be able to crank it up to full speed and it should be correct. Okay, here it is assembled. I put this on, took 2 hands. This could be rotated. You loosen the flange, you could put this any way you want. So I'll try and get this mounted. This is the sand filter. I think it's probably 6 or 8 gallons of water. It's got this giant valve thing on the top, which you can go filter, you can go rinse filter, you can go backwash the sand, closed, whatever. I had to get a little creative with these fittings because it's like a 1.5-inch pipe, I think, and then I had to drop it down. So we have an inlet, an outlet, and a flush. The flush goes out overboard through this through hole. And then the outlet after goes through the sand filter. The sand filter does say it will filter down to as low as 5 microns. I don't think it gets everything. So then it goes from there. I put it into that big 10-inch by 4.5-inch 5-micron paper or polyester filter. So this all gets pre-fed by a low pressure pump and pumped over to the Watermaker. Okay, I have it installed. It's not permanently mounted, but everything is connected and it's running. The noise is definitely a lot less than the diaphragm pump. It has a bit of a high-pitched whine. I guess that's just the way brushless DC motors are. When the mattress and everything is back here, it will probably cut out those higher frequencies or muffle those higher frequencies better. But yeah, it has less of a rumble, sort of lower frequency than the older one had. I got some rubber feet for the brushless DC motor. I have it running right now. I have wound it to, so we're at 89 PSI, roughly. We're getting 108 ppm, very good quality. We're getting 8.5 gallons per hour, so that's pretty good. I got my filter condition back to 100%, put in a new 5-micron filter. So yeah, 8.4, we've just dropped to 8.4, 8.5, so that's really good. That's above spec. It's supposed to be 8. Quite quiet. I haven't put the mattress back yet, but it's running down there, and we're actually back down to 14, spiking to 15 amps. So yeah, very close to a 15 amp breaker. Anyway, with a 30 amp breaker and 4-gauge wire, we've got lots of room for future upgrades. Should be able to upgrade to double that output, about 16 gallons per hour in the future. But for now, 8.4, 8.5 gallons per hour is totally respectable. 100 ppm is amazing, and it is very quiet. I can say right now, I don't have the mattresses on in the front rooms, but with certainty, the clunk of the Clark pump cycling is louder than the feed pump, the brushless DC motor and the vane pump, the boost pump, the feed pump, whatever it's called. So, so yeah, that is the opposite of the way it used to be. It used to be that this pump motor here was by far louder. You could not hear the clunk of the Clark pump as it cycles. That thing drowned it out. So the fact that the Clark pump is louder is great. So to me, that is great. That indicates that it is much quieter. When I put the mattresses back and the bedding on, it should be almost silent. It should be, you know, a little bit louder than a refrigerator compressor. So very pleased with that. Hopefully it will last a long time as well. So we're going to go cruise for a month, run it for a month, and then consider whether or not we upgrade to a larger membrane, crank it up, try to get double the output. But for now, this is a welcome improvement.